Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
This is our riskiest time right now. We cannot let our guard down.
With COVID-19 cases rising, BC extends the ban on social gatherings and events. Also,
our belief is that firefighters have a priority within the community and that we should be recognized for that.
Firefighters and teachers push to be bumped up on BC's vaccination priority list. And
the President has committed an unspeakable assault on our nation and our people.
After yesterday's deadly riot, growing calls to have U.S. President Donald Trump removed from office.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. The ban on social gatherings and events in BC that began as we ended 2020 is now being extended into February. More on why that's happening in a moment, but first a look at today's COVID-19 numbers. And for the third straight day, they include another 8 deaths in our province. BC's death toll now stands at 970. 761 new cases are being reported, the most since December 2nd. The increase is due in part to changes to the government's data collection service and also people's behavior over the holidays. Total cases are now at more than 56,000. Hospitalizations down slightly to 372. 74 of those patients are in critical or intensive care. Active cases remain over 6,300 with little change since yesterday's update. More than 41,000 people in British Columbia have now received a COVID-19 vaccine dose. Those 761 new cases we mentioned represent the highest one-day total in more than a month. Let's bring in our Tanya Fletcher live with the latest COVID-19 update tonight. Tanya, Dr. Bonnie Henry, got a bit emotional in today's briefing.
She teared up while urging people to hold the line and not let up. It's partly because of those numbers we are seeing. As you mentioned, today marks exactly 2 weeks since Christmas Eve. So we're now starting to see those results materialize. Dr. Bonnie Henry says it appears the vast majority of people did put aside celebrations and holiday travel. However, with the number of new cases we're seeing in every health region, she says it's clear some people, quote, made the decision to make an exception for themselves. She cautioned that uptick is sending our curve trending upwards again and then made this impassioned plea.
It's a time for each of us to commit to our own individual heroism, young and old. And I know we can do this. We can do this because it makes a difference for our family, for our community, and for our province. It's compassion and understanding that we need now to get us through these dark days.
And Tanya, so given the precarious position our province is in, perhaps no surprise, restrictions are being extended.
That's right. The restrictions that were set to expire tonight have been extended now for another 2 incubation periods. So they'll now be in place until February 5th. That ban applies to all in-person events and gatherings, both public and private, and that involves faith gatherings, musical performances, movie theater screenings, socializing inside someone else's house, and yes, going out and eating at restaurants with anyone outside your immediate bubble. Dr. Henry says health officials have recently discussed the measures and their effects with religious leaders.
We are looking at how we can work together to support faith communities over the next few weeks and how we can best find ways to safely come back together. But right now, it's about risk of transmission in our communities. And we need to focus on those essential work on our healthcare system, on children being in schools.
Now, we should mention the sports-related restrictions will continue as well. So that involves high-intensity fitness classes and adult indoor and outdoor sports. And the province-wide non-essential travel advisory also remains in effect. Mike?
All right, Tanya, thanks very much. Tanya Fletcher reporting live tonight. Well, more than 40,000 people in BC have now been vaccinated against COVID-19. And with more shipments coming in, concerns are mounting over who will get them. As John Hernandez reports, firefighters and teachers are among those hoping to be bumped up the priority list.
They're among the first people to arrive when there's an emergency, but when it comes to getting the COVID-19 vaccine, firefighters are still waiting.
At this point, we're still uncertain.
Firefighters weren't listed in BC's first immunization priority group, something they're hoping to change amid ongoing talks with government.
Our belief is that firefighters have a priority within the community and that we should be recognized for that.
Other first responders have successfully lobbied for change. Initially, paramedics weren't included on the first list, a move that quickly changed following talks with public health.
We work in uncontrolled situations. We go to motor vehicle accidents and work in people's cars. We go into their homes where people have multiple people within a family have COVID.
Dave Leary is among 4,500 paramedics who will now start getting vaccinated in the coming days.
I will definitely be in line waiting for my turn to get one. Absolutely. Roll up my sleeve and eagerly awaiting to get it.
Meanwhile, teachers are also in talks with the province about when they'll be up for immunization amid mounting exposure events in schools. The BC Teachers Federation hopes they'll be added to the second priority tier, which could start in early spring.
Teachers are frontline workers, and as far as we're concerned, they are working in situations that aren't as safe as they should be.
So far, the province has vaccinated just over 41,000 people, with the focus on long-term care centres, health workers, and remote Indigenous communities. Health officials are urging patience and responsibility as the rollout expands.
After March, we are expecting to get more vaccines, different vaccines, and more volume of vaccines. And we have not yet put out our strategy for the second quarter and into the summer and fall of 2021.
With details still being ironed out, it will be months before the general population starts getting the vaccine. BC is expecting nearly 800,000 doses by March. John Hernandez, CBC News, Vancouver.
In the meantime, residents of 18 remote BC First Nations communities are among the first people in the province getting the Moderna vaccine this week, including a few elders. While some are feeling nervous, many are thrilled to have first access to the defense against COVID-19. A few of them shared what it's like to receive the vaccine.
Okay, that was the Moderna vaccination. I encourage our members to come in so that we can get back to some normalcy in life here within our communities. You want to start seeing your elders and seeing the people that you love and start going back to having our gatherings and being able to get together again and start doing all those fun things we do, then this is the only way forward.
It's important to my family. I've got great-great-grandchildren, I've got grandchildren, and my family comes first with me. And to be a role model and to take the vaccine because they are so precious. And what's precious to Granny should be precious to all that get gas.
We are losing our culture and our language, and being the first peoples to get this will help, keep all of that alive.
What's pushing me forwards is my responsibility to my community.
RCMP and the Kootenays are busy piecing together what led to the killings of 2 people and now the death of the suspect. It happened last night. Our Dan Burrett joins us now live with more on this. Dan?
Mike, Mounties in Creston say just after 7 p.m. Wednesday night, they and other first responders were called to a roadside pullout near a bridge on Highway 3. A man and woman had been stabbed. Police and paramedics and even a passerby tried to save them, but a 40-year-old man from Calgary died at the scene. A 25-year-old woman from the West Kootenay was rushed to hospital, and she later died there. Police say a vehicle linked to the victims was later found in Salmo, about an hour west on the other side of the Kootenay Pass, as you can see on the map. This afternoon, RCMP say the body of a man was found near an electrical shed at a motel in Salmo. His death is not considered suspicious, and he's believed to be the homicide suspect.
We are working very diligently to determine what in fact happened here. We again do believe that the victims were known to the suspect, and there was some familiarity there.
And this footage just coming into CBC News right now of near the scene of that hotel and the shed where the man was found dead. The coroner is looking into his death, but neither the coroner nor police are going to release the names of the victims or the suspect in this case. Mike.
All right, Dan, thanks very much. Dan Burrett with us live tonight. And police are asking for witnesses after a man was stabbed Wednesday morning in Vancouver's downtown east side. Investigators are now releasing surveillance video of the incident and are warning the images may be disturbing to some viewers.
The video depicts the altercation, which does show one man stabbing another man. The suspect walked away west on Hastings Street.
Police say two men were fighting by the Astoria Hotel when things escalated. They're asking anyone who can help identify the suspect to contact them. The victim has been treated for injuries. The investigation into a plane that crashed last summer, killing all on board, has now concluded. The Transportation Safety Board reports the small plane that vanished into the Fraser River last June hit a power line before it sank into the river. The Cessna left Boundary Bay Airport with two men on board, one an instructor, the other a student. The report says the plane was flying in Abbotsford along the river at a low altitude when it clipped the power line. By the time emergency responders arrived at the scene, the plane had disappeared underwater. A search that spanned over months found no trace of the plane or its occupants. Well, after supporters of Donald Trump then stormed the U.S. Capitol building, Democrats and some Republicans now say the president needs to be impeached. To invoke the 25th Amendment, Vice President Mike Pence and Trump's cabinet would need to be on side. As Katie Simpson reports tonight, Democrats are formulating a backup plan as Trump once again stepped in front of the cameras.
Like all Americans, I am outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem.
It took the president more than 24 hours to clearly denounce the chaos his supporters unleashed. In a pre-recorded video statement, Donald Trump finally acknowledged a new administration will soon be in office, claiming he will commit to a smooth transition of power.
We have just been through an intense election and emotions are high, but now tempers must be cooled and calm restored.
This will likely do little to quiet growing calls for Donald Trump to be removed from office, calls that are even coming from members of his own party.
The president is unfit and the president is unwell, and the president must now relinquish control of the executive branch voluntarily or involuntarily.
What happened on Capitol Hill yesterday is a direct result of his poisoning the minds of people with the lies and the frauds.
The vice president is under pressure to invoke the 25th Amendment. Mike Pence would need to get a majority of cabinet to support the move, but reports suggest he's already said no.
If the vice president and cabinet do not act, the Congress may be prepared to move forward with impeachment. We are in a very difficult place in our country as long as Donald Trump still sits in the White House.
There are concerns that Trump's supporters will become even more emboldened if their leader is ousted before his time is up. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton says that's his fear.
We ought to bear in mind the adage, do no harm, because you can make this worse if we're not careful.
With just 13 days left, longtime members of the president's inner circle are now jumping ship. His transportation secretary quit. So did the First Lady's chief of staff. And his special envoy to Northern Ireland, who once served as his chief of staff, resigned too. The last allies standing are trying to stop the bleeding, pleading with staff to stay on, urging Trump to think about his legacy.
The next 2 weeks can begin to right the ship depending on how the president behaves.
Katie Simpson reporting from Washington tonight. And there are many questions about the police response yesterday when people rushed the Capitol building and got inside. And tonight there are some resignations as well. Susan Ormiston takes us through that.
Hard to imagine this is the same scene as calm return to Capitol Hill, with some obvious additions. A 2-meter-high, non-scalable fence hastily erected, going all around the Capitol. Added police presence, a lot more security, a day late. now pressing questions about why rioters were able to storm the Capitol, completely overrunning Capitol Hill police. A former chief was blunt.
But it was a failure, and I apologize on behalf of the security people. We failed.
The current chief of the Capitol Police quit tonight without explaining why other security forces were not called up in advance. DC's Metro Police suited up into their riot gear only after an urgent call for help.
About 1:00 p.m. is when MPD was requested by U.S. Capitol to respond, and things were already pretty bad at that point.
The National Guard on standby wasn't mobilized by federal authorities till well after the breach.
Everyone knew this was going to happen. Why weren't they tracking social media? Frankly, why weren't the protesters, rioters, terrorists, why weren't they infiltrated?
Police are squabbling with protesters.
Posts on social media suggest police allowed protesters in. While that's not verified, there was a stark contrast between this and Trump's crackdown last summer on protesters, calling up the National Guard, even the military.
If tens of thousands of young, old African Americans attacked the Capitol like that, what would have happened?
Demands are growing for a deep security investigation, but none of that coming from President Trump.
CBC's Susan Ormiston reporting tonight, and later this hour, we're going to look into how social media is playing a role in those mounting tensions and how it helps spur the actions of extremists. That's coming up in about 25 minutes. Quick reminder, you can also watch our newscasts live on CBC Gem, CBC Vancouver, also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Well, a year ago tomorrow, the anniversary of a Canadian tragedy, the downing of a Ukrainian airline flying out of Iran, remembering those on board, and Canada's search for answers. Next. And thanks for staying with us during our commercial-free live stream tonight. Well, it's all down to a bidding war for what's left of a legendary bar in Calgary. An auction is being held next week to sell off the remnants of the Ranchman's Cookhouse and Dance Hall. It shut down last year after almost a half-century in business. The CBC got a look at some of the memorabilia that's on sale.
Lots of people calling me now saying, is it really happening? Yeah, it's really happening. They got the legendary bull is there, so there's a bull on the auction block. But lots of fixtures, just, tables and chairs. And so if you spent any time here and you had your butt in one of these chairs, there's probably a good chance you'd be able to buy it if you want. But lots of just the operational stuff, the fixtures and equipment that went into running a bar. Oh, it was gut-wrenching. Walking in here after we first closed the doors, when all the tables and chairs were still in here, it was eerie. And then the day that we opened up the doors and the bailiffs came, Kevin and I sat here and they, removed the assets. It was emotional for me, having grown up in the bar industry in Calgary, and I can't imagine how hard it was for him, having 45 years of his life in this building, spent building something as legendary as this is. I mean, honestly, I don't think there's any other bar in Canada that you can compare to it. We had, I think it was 130 or 140 saddles. Those have all been returned to the people that owned them. I can't even count the number of cowboys that came and said, look, we're coming to get these because we don't want them to go to auction. They were never part of the property here, so we're not going to lose our stuff. But if we reopen, if Ranchman's reopens, give us a call. We'll bring our stuff back. We're open to anything. We're open to a lease deal. We'll consider selling the real estate. Kevin's even talked about reopening it. It may not be over. Yeah, I mean, the old girl's still got some life in her. You can take the tables and chairs, you can take the little bits and pieces, but you can't take the soul out of this building. It's 45 years of history. The history that's here, I'd hate to see that go. And I think a lot of Calgarians would like to see it come back as well. There's a lot of people in this town who've got some great memories. Some pretty epic nights have been had in this place, so hopefully it comes back.
Lots more still to come in just a few seconds from now. But for the time being, have a look at this great view of downtown Vancouver tonight. A dry Thursday evening in Vancouver. Vigils will begin tonight in the local Iranian community to mark the one-year anniversary of a plane crash that killed 176 people, many of them with ties to BC. Families are still searching for answers as they continue to grieve the loss of their loved ones, including a young woman who lost both her parents.
All of our lives as families and survivors of this incident, they have changed. We're now different people. We have different sentiments, we have different life routines, because when you lose someone so close to you, they're always at the back of your mind. So they go on with their lives, they enjoy their lives as best as they can, but there's always that void.
And tomorrow we'll have extended coverage marking the somber anniversary and hear more from victims' families on how the tragedy has been compounded by the pandemic. Those families are still waiting on answers as to what happened. Getting them would require a proper investigation. Ashley Burke looks at what we know and what they're still waiting for 1 year later.
After the Ukrainian passenger jet was shot down, with 138 of its passengers bound for Canada, the Prime Minister immediately demanded accountability from Tehran.
Shooting down a civilian aircraft is horrific. Iran must take full responsibility.
But a year later, that still hasn't happened.
We are very skeptical about the Iranian process.
Iran originally denied its military shot down the plane. It bulldozed the crash site within days and delayed downloading the plane's black boxes for 6 months. Eventually, it suggested human error was to blame and said 6 people had been charged. All while victims' families in Canada who've criticized Iran have been stalked, threatened, and sent misinformation. This week, the Prime Minister's special advisor on Flight 752 says that needs to stop.
It's part of the pattern of behavior that leads a great many people to be very skeptical about Iran's version of events.
Canada has a long list of questions for Tehran, but the chair of the Transportation Safety Board hopes at least some will be answered when Iran issues its final report into the downing.
If we believe that the report is incomplete or is inaccurate in any way, we will speak up.
That's all the TSB can do. It didn't get full access to Iran's investigation and wasn't permitted to launch its own.
It's disheartening because our whole raison d'etre is to find answers, to help the families of those who've lost loved ones.
But Ottawa is trying to find answers in other ways. It's among a group of 5 nations affected who are pushing for greater accountability from Tehran. The RCMP is also helping Ukraine with its criminal investigation, and a former CSIS director is leading a forensic examination into what happened. Victims' families are doing their own detective work too.
We are kind of like fighters. The Iranian regime cannot stop us seeking justice and hide the truth forever.
Javed Soleimani put his PhD on pause to focus full-time on gathering evidence like Iranian audio recordings that he's passing on to Canadian authorities. He says he's still in denial his wife Elnaz Navi died on Flight 752.
I think the moment I fully accept that Elnaz is gone forever, I don't know how I'm gonna live for the rest of my life.
What he does know, he won't stop searching for answers. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Joined now by meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe. Joe, we've had a couple of decent days on the South Coast, but certainly some Stormy weather in the province over the past few weeks, but some areas are being hit a lot harder, like Haida Gwaii.
Yeah, you said it, Mike. The storm track that has been hammering the south coast has shifted north, where they continue to get hit with strong winds and heavy rain. I want to show you video from the storm earlier this week, the one that brought hurricane force winds. This is from James McGuire posting it to the Interior Weather and Wilderness Watchers Facebook group, and you can see and hear just how wild the winds and the waves were. This is on the east side of Haida Gwaii, and this is where winds were well up over 140 kilometers per hour. So a lot of trees down, roads in the region were closed earlier this week. Waves were just pounding the coastline, looking at some erosion. And the community still recovering from what has been a very stormy week and gearing up for the evening that will bring 90 kilometer per hour winds once again. I'm just watching them begin to crank up. I want to show you what this looks like on the satellite and radar. The jet stream just keeps taking these storms up through the northern coast. There is the latest one on the satellite. That center will pass pretty much right over Haida Gwaii. It'll weaken somewhat, so not quite as severe as the winds we saw earlier this week, but we're still talking 90 plus kilometer per hour winds. So we do have those wind warnings all the way down to northern Vancouver Island. I'll be watching the numbers as far as any records that we'll see this season, because it has been an astounding storm season for the north. Also looking at outflow winds for Howe Sound. This is really one of the first times this year we've had this setup. High pressure in the interior, bringing some cold air out towards the west coast. It's been a very mild season for us. So coming up, I'll talk about a little bit of a chill in the air tonight, and yes, the showers for tomorrow. Those details ahead.
All right, thanks, Joe. See you in a bit. The speed of COVID-19 vaccine delivery is becoming more and more critical in provinces where cases continue to soar. Ontario reported another daily record today with more than 3,500 new cases and 89 more deaths. With cases continuing to surge, the province has extended teacher-led online learning until January 25th. Quebec reporting more than 2,500 new cases today, 74 additional deaths, and a province-wide 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew takes effect on Sunday. And Alberta continues to deal with high case numbers, 761 new cases today, the same as us in BC, and 24 deaths. But the province is still planning to resume in-person classroom teaching on Monday. New rules around air travel began today, acting as an added layer of protection from COVID-19. Now, all passengers over age 5 who fly into Canada have to show proof that they tested negative for the virus. The test has to be conducted in the flight's country of origin, and it must have been taken within 72 hours of travel, which is leaving some travelers scrambling.
Korea, actually, in order to get the COVID test, it's actually free. But if you're doing the COVID test because you have to go to another country, then you actually have to pay around 250 Canadian dollars.
Things went smoothly, but there was a lot of process because they ask you where you've been. They ask you when did you get the test, where did you get the test from. They ask you where you're gonna quarantine. They ask you your quarantine plan.
I got notified a little late, and I had to just stay like for a couple days more to get the test done. And also the price that they're charging for the test, I guess it's very too expensive.
And getting a test from the country of departure and fulfilling all those requirements is easier said than done. Simon Dingley checks in on people arriving at Toronto's Pearson Airport.
Rana Latif flew overnight from Cairo. She took a test before boarding and took another upon landing in Toronto.
I'm going to go home to my husband, and I want to make sure that, it's all good. So why not?
This is Ontario's new COVID pilot testing program. International travelers are offered free COVID tests, but getting one before you come home may be another matter.
It was not easy.
Abani Narendra and his girlfriend flew from India to Toronto.
The Canadian government actually looks for a COVID negative report, right? And the Indian government, they do not give any report which says that it's negative. Only if it's positive, they generate a report.
He says he had to make multiple calls and pleaded with the Indian government to get his test results. Eduardo Silva is flying to Vancouver from Sao Paulo, Brazil, but he ran into bureaucratic turbulence trying to determine whether he actually needed it. Silva says he made multiple calls to Air Canada.
She was confused, and at the end she ended the call saying, no, you don't need. The second time, because I was in doubt, so I called, and she's like, no, you really do need.
Silva was worried. He paid 110 Canadian dollars for a test, just in case.
Then I went to check in, and then the check-in, and they said, you don't need a test.
Lorene Smith arrived here from New York. Her husband's negative test came back quickly. She sweated it out for 20 hours, waiting for results, and worried she'd miss a funeral here.
That you have to be within the 72-hour time frame, and whether or not you're going to get your results back is just, it's horrendous, it's nerve-wracking.
Some Canadians are wintering in Florida. Ottawa's Leslie Brull complains 72 hours isn't enough time. He's called several testing facilities.
And they all tell me you'd be lucky to get it within 5 days.
But at the airport facility in Toronto, results should be posted online within 48 hours. Simon Dingley, CBC News, Toronto.
And despite all the ways Ottawa is discouraging travel, airlines are doing the opposite. Aaron Saltzman shows us an industry that is making offers some travelers may not be able to refuse and risking more than just public health.
I've come to the end of my rope.
Peter Hatzipetros has been a cab driver for 30 years, and he says the curfew could ruin him.
How do you stay alive if your customers, if you go from taking one customer every 2 to 3 hours to now taking one customer every 4, every 5?
Still, with rampant spread of the virus and hospitals bursting, the Quebec government says it had no choice but to impose the tough 4-week lockdown, including an overnight curfew.
Starting next Saturday, there'll be a curfew from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m. during 4 weeks.
The Premier wants the streets to be virtually empty at night, with fines up to $6,000 for those who don't comply. The only exceptions, traveling for work or for medical or humanitarian reasons.
We need to reduce the contagion right now, and I'm counting on you all.
The last time Quebec enforced a general curfew was during the Spanish flu pandemic. A century later, déjà vu. Experts say curfews do help.
In the very first wave, curfews were very effective in Italy and France.
He says the rules must be clear to prevent confusion over what is and what is not allowed, especially with so many Quebecers tempted to sneak in short visits with family.
We met them for a little 15 minutes of surprise because they really needed to see the grandkids. Bad idea. Got COVID from the grandkids.
He says they haven't even started to see cases from New Year's parties and holiday travel.
If at one point there's not enough beds, well, we'll need to choose who's going to get the bed. And that's going to be a serious issue.
Ontario is closely watching the rollout of the new rules here in Quebec. The two premiers are speaking tonight as Doug Ford contemplates the possibility of a curfew in his province. Jayla Bernstein, CBC News, Montreal.
9:32 Eastern Time. That is the live scene in Washington, D.C. tonight, the day after that horrible day yesterday. We'll have the repercussions of a day of violence and death and why it happened coming up.
Late last night, and SkyTrain is dead in its tracks in Vancouver's East End. Someone has hurled a signpost over an 8-foot-high fence, a fence that's supposed to make sure this sort of thing doesn't happen.
There was a traffic sign, no parking sign, freshly buried by the Earls overpass. They pulled it out and they flipped it up over the fence. And it weighs about 50, 60 pounds. There must have been about 3-4 people did it. About 250 meters of power rail was torn away from its sockets on the side of the track, and the collector shoes on the train were damaged.
What that means is the train is broken, so a crew was called out to fix about $100,000 worth of damage.
Has to be cut off. Take the hacksaw. Can you get into the hacksaw?
This is the latest in a number of acts of vandalism. So far, no one has been hurt. But with SkyTrain starting regular service tomorrow, the folks who run the system are worried, and they'll pay big bucks to whoever turns in the culprits.
BC Transit has announced a $5,000 reward for information leading to the conviction of these people who did this.
And SkyTrain may have another problem. What if a passenger is badly hurt and sues for damages? The system has liability insurance, but not nearly as much as it would like.
Ideally, yes, somewhere 30, 40, 50 million dollars, but 14 is what we're shopping, what we got right now, what we have got right now. We're going to shop in the new year, well, we're already there. We'll be shopping this year for increased liability coverage.
But that's in the future. For now, BC Transit is holding its collective breath, hoping nothing else happens before the trains start taking on their first paying customers tomorrow morning. Paul Heaney, CBC News, Vancouver. 5 o'clock in the morning in New Westminster, and Don Blake is already up and at 'em. Don is about to go down in history as the first paying customer on SkyTrain.
I got up at 3:30, got down here at 4.
A lot of people are going to say, why?
Well, like someone else asked me, I said, why not? Just for kicks.
Are you a sort of a transit freak in a sense?
No.
Or?
No.
What did you do to ensure you'd get the first ticket?
Stuck my fingers through the barricade into the ticket machine, and it took my money and gave me my ticket.
Just put it right towards me after that.
Being the first to pay has certain duties. You'll be expected to pose for the professional media and the amateur. Then you can relax and take in the view, which at this time in the morning is extremely dark. But not all is in vain. Pretty soon, there's some pretty lights. Before you know it, dawn's downtown.
Some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
The number of new cases we are seeing in every health authority shows us that some people made the decision to make an exception for themselves.
With COVID-19 cases rising because people skirted public health orders and guidelines over the holidays, BC is extending the ban on social gatherings and events until February 5th. Dr. Bonnie Henry is also reporting 761 new cases of the virus and 8 more deaths in our province.
Teachers are frontline workers, and as far as we're concerned, they are working in situations that aren't as safe as they should be.
More than 40,000 people in BC have been vaccinated against COVID-19, and with more shipments coming in, concerns are mounting over who will get them. Firefighters and teachers among those hoping to be bumped up on the priority list.
A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power.
U.S. President Donald Trump has finally conceded, in his own way, the 2020 election to President-elect Joe Biden. In a new video, he also condemned his violent supporters who stormed the Capitol building on Wednesday. He called the riot in the Capitol a heinous attack that left him outraged by the violence, lawlessness, and mayhem. Congressional lawmakers in the U.S. are now calling for an investigation of the police response to the rampage on Capitol Hill. Hundreds of pro-Trump rioters were able to make their way inside the Capitol. There's vandalism and damage throughout the building. Several congressional offices were ransacked and numerous windows smashed. Hallways are littered with personal effects, broken furniture, flags, and graffiti. 4 people are reported to have died in the incident. A woman who was shot by police as she tried to enter a part of the building died in hospital. The others were called medical emergencies. The social media networks, Twitter and Facebook, are giving Donald Trump a timeout until the end of his presidency, saying the effect and likely intent of his posts are to provoke further violence. Now, thousands of posts are circulating on social media pushing baseless claims that the mob that stormed the Capitol building were liberal activists posing as Trump supporters. So what role has online disinformation played in agitating the rioters, and what are their motivations? Joining us now is internet safety expert Jesse Miller. He's a speaker on social media awareness and is a frequent presenter on the subject. Jesse, thanks for joining us. What do you make of what we've been seeing in Washington, D.C.?
Well, obviously, Mike, it's disheartening to see the footage of the United States Capitol, the citadel of democracy, under siege. But realistically here, this was an issue that was basically going to happen. I mean, we saw Trump have a rally where he encouraged his supporters to march down Pennsylvania Avenue. You started to see aspects of the social media conversation becoming more and more radicalized throughout 2019 and 2020, especially with aspects of the pandemic added into the equation. And then with the loss in the election and then all of his disinformation attempts, the reality of it is the far-right extremists who are supporting Trump, and this is far beyond the MAGA approach of 2016. These are individuals who very much are radicalized with conspiracy beliefs, where they believe that he is echoing a great awakening of sorts, and this is a big concern when it comes to safety around the world.
And so is that what's motivating these people?
Well, it's a weird hybrid. You start to see, obviously, the Republicans who have supported Trump for the purpose of power, distancing themselves from him with these events. But realistically, I mean, this has been an issue within the past 2 years of far-right extremism that Trump has recognized can help motivate him towards a second term, which is obviously what he was trying to do with some of the rhetoric around the coronavirus, where he was using language that was not accepted vernacular. At the same time, also, when we start to see the rise of QAnon rhetoric, where they very much see Trump as a savior of sorts, he recognized that delivering information to them that was rooted in his attempts at disinformation would then be propagated on social media, where you start to see everyday users of social media who would lean towards voting Republican start to not only subscribe to some of the conspiracy belief, but actively share it on his behalf.
And Jesse, this isn't just an American problem. We saw Trump rallies in Canada. Our own photographer was assaulted here in Vancouver at one yesterday. What is it about the phenomenon that's letting it take root in our country?
Now, obviously, we've tried our best to kind of always keep our Canadian individuality in our media, but with social media, because it's not necessarily regulated the same way as we would see with CBC and Canadian-produced content, we start to see this global phenomenon of individuals who start to subscribe to beliefs online. And QAnon's quite interesting because it started with this attack on the Clintons, this belief in the elitists, and then it started to very much take root in all sorts of conspiracy beliefs that became this big tent issue. So whether it's 5G technology conspiracy, whether it's the COVID-19 outbreak being an actual plan, or the fact that Bill Gates wants to put microchips into vaccinations, you start to see individuals who just with the smallest belief that something might not be legitimate, then actually have a silo of information that they can basically find anything to meet a narrative. So in Canada, we are seeing more and more individuals, especially in 2020 with more people at home, subscribing to certain aspects of concern because they don't believe in government or they don't believe the Prime Minister. But earlier in 2020, we saw an individual literally drive a vehicle through the gates of Rideau Hall because he wanted to speak to the Prime Minister and he had firearms in the vehicle. That's usually a narrative that we would basically say, where in the United States did this occur? And it really didn't get a lot of fanfare and the attention that the fact that this individual themselves was becoming radicalized in these similar beliefs.
All right, Jesse, we'll leave it at that. Thanks very much for your time. Internet safety expert Jesse Miller with us tonight. It is a blight on our oceans. Ghost gear, fishing equipment lost and impacting wildlife. The federal fisheries plan to try to clean it up coming up. And at 6:43, a live look at downtown Vancouver, the port tonight. Hope you enjoyed the dry day on the coast because an old friend is returning. When will the rain arrive? Johanna's forecast is next.
This is the third season for the provincial government's Waterfront Showcase.
In the 70s, the opening of Ontario Place marked a futuristic statement.
To me, it's a real indication of what can be achieved in Ontario.
It also welcomed all for play, entertainment, and relaxation. The price for admission, just $1.
We, as kids, we were often dragged off to construction sites on the weekend because that's what my father did. He was keeping an eye on everything.
Seidler's father, Ebb, designed several international landmarks, including the Eaton Centre, the atrium at Sick Kids, and Ontario Place. He's seen here in a late 80s architecture series.
We tried to create here an urban park, an extension of the city.
It was very exciting. A lot of things people had never seen before.
It's this radical, incredible piece of 20th century architecture, and it's this deeply loved and important public space.
Fast forward to today, Ontario Place is shuttered. In 2019, the government put out a call for ideas on how to best re-envision Ontario Place.
I think one of the criticisms that a lot of people have had of the process is that it hasn't been open.
In a statement, the government told CBC Toronto the redevelopment of Ontario Place will play a critical role in the province's economic recovery of COVID-19. The process is ongoing, and we will share details at the appropriate time. Seidler and other advocates would like to see the architecture respected. Even more so, they want to see the site public, hosting art galleries, an environmental center, or even an educational facility.
Architecture encloses life.
Seidler's father is in the late stages of Alzheimer's and doesn't recall his life as an architect.
From what I've heard of the proposals they're looking at, he would be horrified. And in that way, I'm glad he is not mentally around to see what's going on. I think he very much cares about the spirit. That's all he talked about when he, through my life was how people engage with places emotionally.
That spirit, one of the most important pieces she hopes will remain. Taylor Simmons, CBC News, Toronto.
We are installing a ghost bike, which is a bike that's been painted all white as a memorial for the man who died here on Monday afternoon. They also serve as a reminder that, whoever you are, however you're trying to get around, wherever you're trying to go, it doesn't matter. You deserve to be able to get there safely. It's just a stop sign here. There's no marked crosswalk for eastbound traffic to stop at, and it's not the safest intersection. It's always hard putting up these ghost bikes, and it is a reminder of the vulnerability that you have when you're not in a car. It is a stark reminder, and it's really a tragedy that we don't need to have. We haven't installed one of these ghost bikes since 2017, which is when the bike lanes opened.
The Market Report is brought to you by Fortis BC. We've got even bigger rebates. Rebate? Whoa! On select high-efficiency equipment for business, but only for a limited time.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe back now with the forecast. We finally got a couple of dry days, but alas, it's all coming to an end.
I know, yeah. After 2 almost whole days of almost rain-free, the next system is just a bit of a blip, though. It'll be done before we know it. Let me take you to the current temperatures, where we're in for a chilly night, as I mentioned earlier. Hanging on to a 6 right now at YVR, but we'll come down to just above the freezing mark. And with a bit of moisture in the air, we could see some frost to start the day. Big picture, as I mentioned earlier, that storm headed up towards Haida Gwaii tonight, but relatively dry for us until the pre-dawn hours. It'll move through quite quickly, and then I'm already taking you through Saturday when we will stay dry, but Haida Gwaii is in for one more system. So through the overnight, there's that front inching across to Metro Vancouver, filling in just before sunrise. So I think we'll see it sort of 4, 5, 6 a.m. begin to track west to east. Look how quickly it moves, though. It's going to be heavy rain at times, sort of a 15 to 20 millimeter shot. And then look at that. By late afternoon, I think we'll get back to the sunshine. So it's a fast-moving system. It'll bring more snow to higher elevations, but we get to see the sun before the end of the day. Saturday is also looking like a nice one. Not all blue sky, but as I take you through to Saturday mid-morning, definitely a nice start to the weekend. Quick look across the province. We've got generally calmer conditions for everyone, thanks to that high pressure that's anchored in through the Kootenays. We've got some sunshine and cooler temperatures to start in through the Peace. Wind chills around -15. Quesnel saw some nice sundogs today, so keep your eyes out for that tomorrow again. Dees Lake is 0, and Prince Rupert, yes, you've got the winds and the rain. Okay, breaking down our 5-day forecast, we've got the morning. Look for that afternoon sunshine, highs around 7. It has been very mild for the end of 2020 and the start of 2021. Our seasonal highs are around 6 for this time of the year. So finally getting down to those seasonal afternoon highs for Saturday and Sunday. Our overnight lows, by the way, are around 2. We have not been anywhere close to that the past few weeks. Rain for Sunday. Not an entire washout, but it does look like a wet end to the weekend. I think we can get the sun back for Monday, sort of on again, off again next week. But I don't think I have to use the word storm train in the long range forecast. That's some good news. And Mike, this is an interesting story. This year, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans will begin collecting ghost gear from the waters off the coast. So that's lost and abandoned fishing gear that will be pulled from the Pacific Ocean, part of an $8 million project.
So how much marine pollution can we expect to be cleared from the Pacific? Colleen Jones shows us the results of the government's efforts in the Atlantic.
That we were going to bring up 4 tons of anchors and 3 kilometers of line.
We've done plenty of stories on ghost gear and the problems it causes, how it affects all marine life, especially whales.
Dying, wrapped in fishing gear.
We've even done a story on a man who built this shed in Yarmouth, almost all of it made from lost gear rolling onto the shore.
This is built from junk I found on the beach.
To combat all of this, last year the government started the $8.3 million Ghost Gear project, and part of that money funded projects across the whole Atlantic region to help clean up the mess.
We recognize the challenges we're having with plastics pollution in the ocean.
Fisheries Minister Bernadette Jordan.
So it was actually really exciting to have this program put in place and to see the involvement. It was so oversubscribed. But this year we took out 63 tons of ghost gear from the waters around Atlantic Canada.
This is really just the tip of the iceberg.
That's Alexa Goodman, and she runs a ghost gear project through Coastal Action. They focus on the area from around Lunenburg to Annapolis Royal, and what they've hauled out of the water so far?
We've removed 7 tons of debris, 186 lobster traps, and over 500 kilograms of rope.
Her group's upcoming projects include not just more retrievals, but a shoreline cleanup in Annapolis Royal and putting 10 rope recycling bins in harbors along the southwest coast to allow for better disposal of old rope.
It definitely is a challenge to retrieve the gear, but with experience comes hopefully more success.
It's not just about taking it out of the water. It's about developing new technologies to stop it from going in the water, to be lost. It's about making sure that we're developing technologies that stop entanglement of whales and marine mammals, which is extremely important. But it's also not just taking it out of the water and putting it in a landfill site, but making sure it's recycled.
The projects are funded until 2022, but they say pulling 63 tons of lost gear like lobster traps and crab pots plus 3,200 meters of rope out of the ocean is making a big impact on the ghost gear problem. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Halifax.
Well, a snow day may be a regular occurrence for many Canadians, but for one Nigerian family in Regina, it was a first. Their reaction next.
Hi, my name is Paul Chafe. It's 46,000 lights we had on over the last couple of years. It is lit up and all going until old Christmas Day or my wife will kill me.
What's so special about leaving them on till old Christmas Day?
Christmas is not over until old Christmas Day.
It's really a long-standing tradition that people put their decorations up for the entire Christmas season and then take them down on or immediately after Old Christmas Day. And some people, of course, even say that it's bad luck to keep your lights up and your decoration up after Old Christmas Day.
Is it bad luck to leave your lights on after Old Christmas Day?
Depends, I guess. I wouldn't do it, but some people may, but I would not, no.
Well, Old Christmas Day really is historically two different things. Calendar was corrected hundreds of years ago, and when the calendar was corrected, 12 days were thrown out. The Christmas of one year was not fully 365 days after the other. So people in their folk memory of Christmas said, well, this isn't really Christmas, let's wait till Old Christmas Day. The religious side of it is the fact that it's actually the beginning of the next church season of the Epiphany. But that's what Old Christmas Day is and why it carries some of the load of old customs of Christmas Day. Churches would often burn all of their decorations on Old Christmas Day. That became a kind of a ritual in itself, and thus the domestic decoration was sort of like that. And then people thought, okay, I really should be doing this for good religious reasons. So there was a ritual that grew up around that notion of taking down and doing away with your decorations for the rest of the year.
When you turn the lights on for the last time on Old Christmas Day Eve, will that be kind of a special night for you?
Yes, normally now me and my wife, we go out and we have one last walk around and enjoy it.
When Old Christmas Day comes and goes, do you miss it then? Do you miss having them on?
I do. It's really dark.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
Never miss out on a CBC contest, special series, or information. Make sure you sign up to our e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver Inbox. And CBC Vancouver is a proud sponsor of the Digital Inclusion of Isolated Mothers in Canada Conference, January 19th to the 20th. Join BC Today host Michelle Elliott on day 2 of the conference. Learn more at mothersmattercentre.ca.
Well, a family of 4 settling into life in Regina after a long journey. They moved here from Nigeria and are experiencing a Canadian winter for the very first time.
Yes, Adeolua Atayero has more on how the family is making Saskatchewan its home.
1, 2, 3, go!
The 2020 pandemic made it a tough year for people everywhere. And for the Oyedeles, it was extra challenging. They moved from one continent to another just as lockdowns and quarantines were being declared worldwide.
We had prepared for it for a couple of months before it eventually worked out. And so we had learned some things ahead, tried to connect with some organizations here that were very helpful, that welcomed the immigrants, and so it made it so much smooth for us, and so we're so grateful for the whole experience.
Despite all their planning and preparation, the family faced a number of hurdles adapting to Regina, especially after the weather started to get colder.
Cold, I know. This is the first snow we are experiencing like this, and we really we had to pray like, God help us, and God really did. It was really awesome. We've been coping well. The children have been coping well.
Damilare Oyedele was offered a job at a tech company in Regina. He decided it would be a great opportunity for the entire family, as well as a huge change.
We found a community of church, and that really helped us, both in Alberta where we came to Regina. The community of church has been so supportive, and it made us feel like
Much
home,
easier.
like we are already home, you know.
7-year-old Glory has enjoyed making new friends since she's moved here. She's also having fun playing in the snow with her 3-year-old sister, Grace.
It's fine, and I like it. Ooh, I love it.
Do you like Canada? Do you like this place?
Yeah, okay.
And then when snow is coming.
Especially
when snow is coming.
Once it is safe to do so, the Oyedeles look forward to meeting more Nigerians in the Regina community. Adeoluwa Atayero, CBC News, Regina.
And Joe, they're certainly dressed for a Saskatchewan winter.
Indeed, yeah. Parkas are on tap tonight. I was just checking, getting down about -15 without the wind chill in Regina. We're complaining about getting close to zero. So yes, Parka weather, they did well. I know.
All right, Joe, thanks for being with us again tonight. We'll see you tomorrow, and thank you for watching. You can always watch our newscasts online, cbc.ca/BC. Our next local news, 11 o'clock. Dan Burrett is here after the National. Have a great night.
Good night.